As you probably surmised by the thumbnail, I'm kind of going through a little bit of a process. Now, I didn't want to share it here with you until I was further along in the process so as not to jinx anything, because this is my third cycle, and I have been sharing my experiences and my journey on Instagram, but on different platforms. Something I always found really interesting, on different platforms, I have an entirely different audience. So we have people on Facebook and Instagram that have no freaking clue that I actually have a YouTube channel. So the only thing they really know about me is what I share on those platforms. So I'll have a lot of people kind of asking me questions in the comments or starting discussions that are kind of things that I've gone over here on my channel for like several years. So things that people that have been with me here for a while would know the answer to or would understand, because you know that part of my life, but they don't. So I realized when kind of sharing this story with you, there's probably some questions that you might have. So I kind of want to go on the questions that I get asked on different platforms, as well as my private Facebook page where I have my family on. So I thought it would be interesting to kind of address all of those things while telling you really what's been going on. So now that I'm further along in the process and it's nearly 100% that I'm going into the retrieval portion of the process, we kind of cross that hurdle. So before we get to that point, I can actually talk about it with you. Also, some of you might be new here, so there are certain things that you might not know about me and might not understand. So to the diehards that have been here for a while, you know that I've wanted to be a mother for a very long time. Something that I've wanted for probably, this is gonna sound a bit creepy, but my whole life, ever since I was a little girl, ever since I was a kid, I've always wanted to have that family. I've always wanted to have children. I wanted to be a mother, always. So as far as partners are concerned, I've had 3 serious relationships, and my first one would be one that lasted 8 years. Every person that I was with, I thought that I was going to be with for the long haul. And that's kind of like that. I didn't want to be in a long-term relationship and kind of waste my time. So obviously being in a relationship for 8 years, you think you're going to be in it forever. But what ended up happening is, number one, this person was much older than me. I was 16 years old when we got together, and they were like 21, 22, I want to say. And we got together in 97 and broke up in late 2004, early 2005. And I ended things because towards the end of the relationship, what I noticed ended up happening is that I was kind of becoming a glorified maid. And it became very, very clear that after 8 years, this person had absolutely no intention of marrying me. I was wasting my time. And I was also in a very loveless relationship, and I was starved for affection. And I'm like, no, I want love, damn it. I want love. I want that connection with somebody. And I thought I'd found that in my next partner, who it turned out that I married. My second long-term relationship was almost immediately after, and this is somebody that I actually had married. Now my ex-husband, but this is a person who was presented to me as somebody who shared my values and wanted the same things out of life, wanted children. And to me, that was a deal breaker. Do you or don't you want children? And that was a major deal breaker for me. And he said he wanted those things. He wanted that life. So I moved to England, which is where he was from. I moved to England. So after we were married, his tune kind of began to change in terms of children. Like every time I tried to broach the subject with him, it's something he would blow me off on. It was not lost on me. And finally, I really confronted him about it. And he said, well, you need to realize that if you want to be with me, you're going to die childless and alone, which was devastating. Because again, another relationship. I invested a lot. I invested 5 years in the relationship, and I really thought that I'd found like my partner. Very quickly, he had changed his tune, and I asked him why he changed his mind, and he said he never wanted children in the first place, and that he lied, and that he would have said anything to get me on a plane and over to England. So I was lied to. My current partner, this is my longest relationship. We've been together for more than 12 years now. And we met in England, and we met long before we actually got married. We met when I was on my honeymoon with my ex, which is crazy in itself, but we had always just been friends. But when we had gotten together, I was 30. And when we got married, I was 32. And then we'd made the decision to move to the US. He went through the whole visa process. So when I came back here and he came here for the first time, it was really starting from scratch. I'd been in England for about 6 years at that point, and I hadn't been home in a really long time. So I needed to get a car. I needed to work on getting an apartment. I had to get a job. He had to go to school. Eventually I went to school. So we had a lot of things that we needed to work on. I didn't have health insurance at the time. So it was like this big, long process to kind of get toward the things that we needed to in order to be stable and independent once again, starting all over again, starting from scratch. So we did need to stay with my mother for a little while he went through school. And after he was done with school, I was going to go to school. But regardless of that, even though we didn't have our own apartment, we were going to stay with my mother for a while. We both had to go to school, and we were both working I was working the part-time job. He couldn't work yet. He didn't get his work visa right away. So he was going to school full time. But regardless of that, as irresponsible as it is, I wanted to jump on that baby train like immediately when I was 32. We just gotten back to the US. I'm like, come on, let's do it. Let's go. And he was trying to be the voice of reason. And like, we can't do that. Where are we going to put this child? We live with your mother. We don't have health insurance. I don't have, I'm not out of school yet. I'm not employed. And as much as I understood that, I wanted my baby, damn it. I wanted to have a child. And it had been so long that I felt like I'd been waiting. And I'm like, come on, let's do this already. And he was so steadfast in that belief, I kind of got scared that he was going to pull the same crap my ex did on me. But he assured me, he's like, no, I want to be a father, but I want to do this right. I don't want to bring a child into instability. I want to make sure that we have that structure, that we're bringing a child into the correct environment, which I understood, but in my head I'm thinking, yeah, but your balls don't have an expiration date. But at the same time, I also accepted it because I come from a family of procreators. I mean, they can look at a baby and just get pregnant immediately. And my mother had my little sister at the age of 41. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, we can do this. We won't leave it too long. We can do this. So at the age of 37, my husband finally says, okay, 37 for me, he's younger than me, but at the age of 37 for me, he said, okay, we have a structured environment, we have financial stability, we have health insurance, we are stable enough to bring a child into the world. Let's start trying. Being a mother isn't something I kind of decided on a whim. It's something that I've wanted for many, many, many years, decades. I've wanted it. It's just, unfortunately, much later in life, everything kind of fell into position to where that's when it became possible. Another question that I get, well, why isn't pregnancy working for you? How come you can't get pregnant? Okay, so we didn't start the process till I was about 37 years old. And when we started the process, like I said, I thought it was going to happen really easily because of the way that my family is. You know, everybody gets pregnant so easily. My mother had my sister at the age of 41. So I really didn't think anything of it. And when I wasn't getting pregnant, I'm like, okay, something's off here. Something's a little strange. So we finally went to go see a fertility specialist. So I want to say around 2018. And around 2018 is when I had a lot of different blood work done. And we had to get a baseline for me. My husband as well, they get your baseline, kind of see where you're at, what's going on. So as it turned out, my follicular reserve, as well as my LH and FSH, all of those necessary hormones were peak. They were perfect. And they said that they were that of somebody under the age of 35, and that's something very important because anybody who's on a fertility journey, the number 35 is a very important number because anything 35 and above is bad, and it's when they consider you kind of high risk pregnancy. So 35 and under, very good. So my husband's blood work, perfectly fine as well. So they couldn't really understand what was going on there. They thought that we were just, our timing was off. So initially, they started you with timed intercourse. Then it became timed intercourse with the addition of letrozole. Still nothing. So we did, as par for the course, genetic testing. It's something that's also very, very important when you're kind of nearing the process of IVF where all else is kind of failing. So we did genetic testing. My husband came back perfectly fine. So I came back as having Hashimoto's. So whereas I always thought I had kind of run-of-the-mill, slightly elevated TSH levels, which my doctor put me on levothyroxine, a really low dose, because it wasn't that bad when I had it tested a few years ago. Well, my TSH was way higher at that point, so I was in the midst of full-blown hypothyroidism at that point. And I had to get an endocrinologist and start working with an endocrinologist, get that down. And I also was diagnosed with this autoimmune disorder that was causing my hypothyroidism. Hashimoto's interferes with ovarian function, and then of course it interferes with your thyroid, and your thyroid controls everything. So strike one. Our fertility specialist, he doesn't like to be an alarmist, and he doesn't like to jump the gun either. Looking at my results, looking at my husband's results, he really couldn't see any issue on paper. So he really kind of chalked it up to just really poor timing and just one of those things. So it wasn't until 2020 that I went for my first IUI, and IUI is artificial insemination. So artificial insemination is when they essentially take your husband's teammates and they wash them. And what that means is they take all the slow swimmers out, any that look a little bit off or, questionable, and then they remove the floor model viscous fluid that it comes in, and they replace it with something a little bit more high powered and like turbocharged and high speed so they can swim easier. And it's also purple. But in addition to that, they kind of install it in me in a long tube, which bypasses the cervix. So by removing all of these different variables, they're essentially giving like a bullet train ride, door-to-door service to where it needs to be. And by removing all of these variables, you are essentially meant to kind of increase your chances at pregnancy and, bypass all of those other issues. So on top of that, I was taking a medication that makes you ovulate more eggs. They give you a trigger shot so they know exactly when you're going to ovulate. This was March 17th, 2020. On March 23rd, 2020, the entire world shut down and went into lockdown. So our fertility journey was at a standstill for just over 1 year, I want to say. So it wasn't until about 2022 that I was able to get back into fertility because only essential services were operating. And when it came to fertility, that wasn't considered essential. And everything was put on hold until they kind of opened up operations again. After I get back into the fertility specialist, they immediately started us back up on the letrozole and the timed intercourse thing because they were still convinced that it was something to do with timing. And once again, nothing happened. So kind of flustered, my fertility specialist sent me for something called an HSG test. It's a really long name. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it, but you can Google it if you want to, which is massively painful. And it sounds kind of normal until you really consider the whole process. And it is not only painful, they told me, well, you should maybe bring a pad with you because you might spot. Spotting was a massive understatement. I bled. So the reason that the fertility sent me for the HSG test was maybe there's something going on with your fallopian tubes. They push fluid into the uterus and they kind of push it into the fallopian tubes and it makes them expand so they can see them and take pictures and kind of see what's going on in there. So normally we have 2 fallopian tubes and your ovaries chill at the top end like so. This one, my left one, basically exists, but as it turns out, it is only really for show. It is for display purposes because it doesn't do anything. So when you ovulate, the egg is going to be released from your left or your right. It's kind of roll of the dice. It really depends on which one matures first. And then afterward, it takes a ride down this tube. The problem is my eggs are getting fired into a door that is bolted shut. It never makes its way down because my left fallopian tube is gatekeeping my eggs. This reduces my chances of conceiving by about 30% because if I ovulate on the left side, it ain't happening. So what made things so much worse, by being part of the fertility clinic for as long as we have and getting well versed in my body and what it does, and basically bi-weekly, seeing my ovaries and seeing like the eggs that I produce, like kind of, they monitor your ovulation, they monitor your egg production, and you get to see it on the screen. It turns out I am a lefty, which essentially means that my body favors the left for some reason. So usually when I ovulate, I'm ovulating on the left. And when they give me the letrozole, which is the medication that makes you kind of release more eggs, so I'm producing, and this was every single time, I was producing more on the left than I was on the right. So I would produce 4 mature eggs on the left and maybe 1 or 2. So the ones on the left would mature so much faster that those were typically the ones that were getting released, and the ones on the right were just kind of like, meh. So not only were my chances reduced by the Hashimoto's, but then we have one of my fallopian tubes that's blocked at the distal portion on the left. So my left one isn't working. But to add insult to injury, I tend to ovulate much more on the left than I do the right, so that kind of further reduces my chances at conceiving. So if I'm ever to conceive naturally, I must ovulate on the right side. And given that I was mostly ovulating on the left, the likelihood was reduced so drastically. Something else that I hear quite often is, isn't IVF like incredibly expensive? Isn't it something that you're kind of taking a gamble on, considering that, you're doing it a little bit later in life and you're potentially burning through like your life savings doing this? Yes, it's expensive, but no, not for me. And there's a very good reason why I don't talk about this, because there are a lot of people, a lot of couples, a lot of families, a lot of just individuals, people who want to be parents so badly, but they're struggling with infertility. And the only reason that they've not pursued the concept of IVF is because of how expensive it is. So to discuss how accessible it's been for us and how inexpensive it's been, it feels like I would be kind of bragging and rubbing it in their faces. And that's like the last thing that I want to do. So to kind of put it into perspective, IVF is something that is very expensive, but our health insurance happens to favor family building. And when it comes to IVF, it's something that is heavily covered. Regular office visits to where you would get blood work, consultation, ultrasounds versus treatments, like actual treatments, it's going to be the same copay. It's going to be anywhere between $20 and $40, which would run somebody an excessive amount of money. So right there, the copays are incredibly cheap. So it's not like I'm paying these extortionate specialist fees for that. In addition, I am on several different medications, and the medications themselves are also very, very expensive, particularly one medication that I'm on. It's an injectable. I'm doing 3 injectables, and I'm not doing any medications, any pills this cycle, but the most expensive one would be the Menopur. So for the current dose of Menopur that I'm taking, which is going to be daily for anywhere between 8 and 12 days, that costs $9,000 for that medication alone, and I spent under $300. So it just kind of puts in perspective how incredibly inexpensive this whole process has been. So the whole process itself, just one cycle alone, could run you a minimum of like $15,000. And for us, it's been less than half of our rent. For me to have this opportunity and have it come so easily, I would be a complete lunatic to pass this up and not at least try. So the next question that I get is, well, is an adoption on the table? So we started the whole process of adoption about 2 years ago. And the thing about that is the wait time is excessively long, and it's also incredibly expensive. Like, I think IVF is expensive. The whole process of adoption is going to run you between $30,000 and $60,000. My whole life, what I've always wanted is I wanted at least one biological child, and I wanted an adoptive child. I wanted to adopt my whole life. That is another thing that I've always wanted to do, is I've always seen myself adopting, as well as having a child of my own. That's kind of always been like my plan. So the next question, oddly enough, comes from my family, because my family is very pro me going through IVF. They were the ones that were kind of pushing for me to take it to that next step, because I never thought that I would do 1 round of IVF, let alone 3. And the reason that I'm on my 3rd is this is the one that, knock on wood, is most likely the most successful. Like, I've gotten the furthest. The first 2, I didn't get this far. So that's why I didn't really want to talk about it right away, because I didn't make it to this point. So it wasn't until this cycle that I've actually made it past a final hurdle. But despite that, it was my family that were really pushing me. Hey, try IVF. You know, you have the opportunity. You're going to regret this later in life. And I know that I would. I knew that I would. If I didn't, 10, 20 years down the line, I would have regretted not taking the chance. You know, I had the opportunity available to me. Why didn't I do it? So I digress. My family, who was very pro this, also asked me, hey, are you worried about any birth defects or genetic abnormalities or anything like that, given your age? No. And the reason why is because our insurance covers genetic testing. So after fertilization, they genetically test, they do a biopsy on the embryo prior to transfer. And they screen it for basically everything, which greatly reduces the risk of any kind of abnormality. The unfortunate side effect of that, though, is the whole concept of like freezing, thawing, and then like performing a biopsy on the embryo. It increases the risk of losing the embryo entirely or failed implantation of the embryo once it's transferred. So even though there is that risk of potentially losing the embryo prior to implantation, the risks of not doing it are just way worse. Another question I get from my family is they want to know if I'm going to stay at my job, because the reason they ask this is because they know they're out of state. I don't have any family really that are in state. And then my husband's family, they're in France and they're in England. So it's not like we have any family that are here locally that would be able to help us out. So it's kind of just us, and childcare is expensive. I plan on going back to school, and I want to go back to school to become a dietitian. And fortunately, a lot of that can be done online. Also, as an esthetician, I have everything that I need to perform services and to see clients outside of my home. I have everything here. Everything that you would essentially see in a spa room, I have the heated table, hot cabbie. I have the ozone steamer with the mag light combo. I have microcurrent, LED, high frequency, wax pots. The only thing I'm missing, which I'm actually looking into getting, is the microdermabrasion machine. But other than that, I basically have everything that I need other than the necessary licenses that I would need to be able to render services out of my home. So that's kind of a bridge that I'm going to cross when I come to it, but I want to be able to see clients out of the home, which would make life so much easier because I always wanted to have like a spa room in my house. So that is kind of the next step, which is great because it puts me inside my home where I can actually be here for my child, and I can also see my clients, render services, and not have to worry about childcare because I'm here. When you kind of make it to my age and you make it to this stage of the game and you've been wanting to be a parent for so long and you've had so many failed attempts in relationships, like you get in a relationship, you think this person is the one, you want to spend your life with them, and then it turns out not to be the one and you've wasted almost a decade. And it's like, all right, I got to start from scratch. Then you meet somebody else who again, they claim to want that life with you, and then you realize you just wasted another 5 years. So when all of these things happen and time passes and it consistently passes and you see other people having children, what ends up happening is you build it up in your mind to be this like majestic thing that only like magical people can do, and like almost like on par with unicorns. You see someone pregnant, you're like, oh, how did you do that? Spending all of that time not being able to do it and wanting to, it just gets built up into this like big thing that doesn't seem attainable. Because I built it up to be this huge thing in my head, I'm afraid. You know, my doctors assure me that I'm healthy for my age because of how much I've taken care of myself. I've taken vitamins my whole life because I didn't actually have health care. I never had access to health care. I never had health insurance. So out of fear, I kind of became my own doctor. And I ate well, very well. And I constantly took supplements. So I was always focusing on different nutrients, and I was always making sure that I was taking care of my body. And in that respect, kind of fear and paranoia of getting sick served me well because it kind of preserved me internally in a lot of ways. It didn't stave off the autoimmune disorder, but again, those things are triggered by trauma. So I blame my parents for that. And my ex, bastards. I know that I would be a good mom, but it's just the tiny stage. It's like they're so fragile, and everything you say and everything that you do, it really does affect them on such a deep level, and I want to make sure that I get it right and I do it right. So it's like this unicorn status thing because I've built it up to this huge thing because I've not achieved it. As far as my channel and as far as the way things go here, I would like to remain kind of business as usual. It's going to be a goth channel, and that's really what my channel is based in. It's not going to become a baby channel. Will I show my baby? No. I think it's weird. I no shade to anybody that does do that. That's their prerogative. But when it comes to my child, I mean, I am protective of the things that have you ever seen my husband? Partially that's his decision as well, but I get it. And I would never, ever aim a camera in his direction, even if he was like somewhat in the background. I would never do that. So in a few days, I'm going to be going in for surgery, and that's going to be the egg retrieval. And because I have really bad acid reflux, what's going to end up happening is they're going to have to intubate me, which I hate. It hurts so bad. I actually had a procedure last year in June, which was, it's called a DNC, which is where they, I guess lack of a better way to put it, exfoliate you from the inside. A little sore afterward, but what was the worst was the way that my throat and neck felt afterward because I needed to be intubated, and they intubate you when you have bad reflux because they need to protect your airway from potential aspiration of acid into your lungs, which can really mess you up. So I have to be intubated for that, and they're going to be doing the egg retrieval, and we're going to see so far what we're looking at is about 10 eggs, and they tend to be some hiding, so I'm hoping that there are some good ones hiding, that they're viable, that once fertilized, they're healthy. But, you know, as I said, this is a very rare opportunity that I've been given because there are a lot of people that really would kill to be in the position to be able to get IVF. And the fact that our insurance is so family focused that they've covered 80-something% of it is something that I would be a lunatic to pass up. The reason I really didn't want to mention that is because of how rare of an opportunity it is, because of how expensive it is and how inaccessible it is to a lot of people who would love to have that opportunity. And I've seen the communities, I've kind of been on the forums and kind of looking around and seeing people's experiences, and there's a lot of pain involved. There's a lot of sadness, and I know it because I felt it a long time. And given the fact that I understand and I felt that, like, the last thing I want to do is kind of rub it in the faces of the people who are struggling with that. But at the same time, a lot of people are curious where I'm getting all this money from, and probably should know that I'm not paying a lot of money at all. And I hope that the people who are struggling are able to find a way to do it. Now, when it comes to the medications that are very expensive, we're going to have a lot left over. And what we plan to do is you can donate them to clinics, and they will gift them to a lot of couples that are having trouble with the co-pays. So a lot of the medications that are really expensive, we can donate them so that these couples can actually have access to them when they previously might not have been able to afford it. So it makes me feel a little bit better to know that we're capable of doing that. You know, who knows, maybe we can help a family. Even if we don't succeed, maybe we can help another couple be able to have a family of their own. But I wanted to let you know what's been going on and what will be going on in the future. So they're predicting, I think Wednesday, that I'll be going in for the egg retrieval. Fingers crossed, be able to get some decent follicles, get some good ones. The way I kind of look at this whole process is kind of like a mild hazing, and the reason that I think of it that way is because if you're willing to kind of endure all the physical, emotional, and psychological horrors that can happen by way of going through the process, then you really do want this. You're not just making a spur of the moment choice. This is not something that somebody does or a decision that somebody makes lightly. Firstly, you're gonna gain weight. The medication, the hormones, you will gain weight. But guess what? Should you be successful, you're going to gain a lot more weight. So if you can accept the fact that you can gain this amount of weight, which I think I gained about 10 pounds in the last 3 months being on the hormones, I don't care. It doesn't bother me because I know what the end goal is. And that's something that's really important to me. And weight can be lost, but in the end, I get to have a baby. Another thing is that it will really alter your comfort levels physically. The injections, they hurt. My stomach is bruised up to no end. I would show you, but I'm pretty sure that YouTube doesn't allow that. My lower abdomen is very swollen by way of trauma of the constant needles. I get 3 injections a day. So it's bruised. I have broken blood vessels, and it's swollen. And it's hot to the touch. And speaking of hot, I have Hashimoto's, which causes hypothyroidism, and by way of hypothyroidism, I'm just naturally by default always freezing. I am hot right now. I'm always overheating. Crazy vivid dreams. Like, I normally have vivid dreams, but these are unhinged. Another thing is that the hormones will mess with your hair. My eyebrows, I got the Ronco Juice Dude's eyebrows, not in terms of thickness, which I wish that would happen because I would love to have more luscious eyebrows again. But no, the sparse and small amount of eyebrows that I do have grown longer and unruly. So that's another fun side effect of the medication. Then you have, of course, the psychological effects. It's very emotional. And it's not only emotional in terms of how the hormones make you feel, because hormonal fluctuations will definitely make you feel like all kinds of things. But it's also the stress of the thing, because now I have to go into the office every single day. Like, it starts where you're there every 3 days, then every 2 days. Now I'm every day, where they're constantly having to check your blood because they need to check and see how close you are to ovulation. Because if you are, they need to kind of stop that as much as humanly possible or bring you in for retrieval. Because should you ovulate, you're basically dumping all the eggs that you took that long to produce. And that's something that you don't want to do. So you end up kind of becoming a human pincushion by way of getting your blood drawn constantly. You're in there every day, and it's stressful. A little bit of a ramble, but I do hope that this video was at least in some way informative and helpful. I wanted to let the community know, because I was really nervous. I was sharing things on Instagram, but I was nervous about letting the community know what was really going on, because I know that you would probably be afraid that I'm going to let this turn into a baby channel, but I'm not going to do that. I promise I'm not going to do that. There's been a lot of thought and a lot of planning that has gone into this, because I've had a lot of time to do that. And fortunately, I am like a doomsday prepper when it comes to basically everything. If you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and I hope this video has been informative. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below, and I'll make sure to try and answer them as much as I possibly can. But until next time, everybody, bye.